Truth channel. How's everybody doing this evening? Tonight on this live stream, we're going to talk about how liberalism and their sexual exploits or their sexuality help Hitler rise to power, basically, and the same thing that's going on in this country. It's the comparison. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, but that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So gotta wait a couple minutes for people to show up. But I tell you what, I'm a little late tonight. YouTube, I tell you what, they do everything they can in the book to try to hinder me in any way, try to make it tougher on me. Thinking they're actually going to get a stop sign that is going to stop me. But anyway, I got lots of plans on YouTube. It's not only to sit here and talk about the world falling apart. I want to make the world laugh. And, got lots of things to do. Maybe I'll get some stuff that YouTube don't find too sensitive, and they'll tolerate me a little bit more. Crazy times, people. Mr. David, what's your topic today? I'm going to talk about liberalism and the sexualism. The same thing we're going through with trans and stuff. The Weimar Republic. Okay, let me get it out of my mouth. Dealing with the Weimar Republic and the evils that it caused, and how they dealt with it, and how it helped Hitler rise to power, and the correlations that is going through our country, the same thing that's going through our country right now. Okay, crazy stuff. But yeah, I learned a lot of history, and I call myself a student of history. And to find stuff out this late in my life, because I always wondered how Hitler came to power. I realized I didn't really think it was over because they were pissed off the way World War I ended. But you do a little research and find out more. And I knew the Weimar Republic was, bad, but I didn't realize how bad it was and how bad Germans had enough. Okay? And I'm going to talk about the book burning. And I'm going to associate it with something that's going on in our country right now. And not what the government's doing, but what parents want done. Okay? Yeah. A lot of correlations. This is one thing about this live stream, J99. This one might get canceled, okay? They might turn it off because it has to do with Jews, transgender, all this stuff, okay? I forgot to look something up. I know where the first transgender surgery was performed, but I forgot to look up what date it was performed. So anyway, but let's get into the subject. Okay. After World War I, Germany obviously had problems, right? And, back in the day, even back then, we had transvestites, we had gay people, we had men that wanted to be women. We had all of that still, okay? But the thing is, society hadn't accepted it. So it was, everybody, like in this country before, it was kept underneath the rug, right? So, anyway, it was kept in their closet. They did it, they hung out with their groups, and they kept it in the closet because it wasn't socially acceptable. Well, after World War II, in the Weimar Republic, that's the government that was formed in Germany after World War I. After they lost and the Kaiser was gone, that's the new government that was formed. And let's just say they tried to turn Germany into Sodom and Gomorrah. A lot of sick stuff went on in there. And like I say, I'm going to correlate it to what's going on in this country and the feelings the Germans had back then and the feelings that Americans are having, okay? And you'll be able to correlate. Like I say, it's history repeating itself, okay? The pieces coming together. And I hope to hell it just doesn't keep coming together like it's going to look like it's going to come together. Anyway, I'm learning a lot. They're releasing a lot of history these days. Okay. So they turned Berlin, basically started in Berlin or the bigger cities, right? And it was pleasures of the flesh let loose. Drugs, sex, and I guess they didn't have rock and roll back then. Maybe it was big band music. But anyway, crazy times. They actually were in two, and I can recognize with this, okay, part of it. I was in the military. All right. So they had these, what they called slumming back then in the early 1920s, during the 1920s in Berlin, in the bigger cities in Germany. And what slumming is that tourists would come there and they wanted the excitement of Berlin, so they would go to the slums, calling it slumming, and entertaining themselves there. I don't need to go in what about. But anyway, in the military, right, when we pulled into port, they'd always tell us the places we weren't supposed to go. You know, it's called the gut back then. Don't go to the gut. Well, where do you think we all went to first? Just correlation. You know, I'm not saying when you're young, you ain't stupid. You know, usually when you get older, you should outgrow it. But anyway, they're called it slumming. In Berlin, how can I say this? Berlin became like the place where people from all over the world that were that type of people, transvestites, transgender, homosexuals, lesbians and stuff, went to, mostly from Europe, but all over the country, all over the world, came to Berlin because they felt their lifestyle would be acceptable, okay? Anyway, and the Weimar Republic did have some laws against this stuff, indecency and stuff like that, all right? And we'll get into, you know, and they didn't enforce the laws. Kind of like we have laws now in this country against drag queens. Obviously, drag queens reading story time to kids in elementary, it should be against the law. Men going in women's bathrooms, playing in women's sports, going to women's locker room, or women doing this, the opposite, shouldn't be, that's against the law, or used to be. If a straight guy went and did that, that'd be against the law. And it doesn't matter, these guys that say they're women that are going into these women private spaces are still raping the women. But, so anyway, but Berlin was accepting, they were starting to do the same stuff. And the people were starting to get upset about it, okay? I mean, their culture was being destroyed. All this Sodom and Gomorrah stuff was coming to Berlin, and their culture, the German culture, was being destroyed. And the people were starting to get upset. What did Berlin have? Berlin had the first published lesbian city guidebook, lesbian city guidebook. I'm talking Berlin in the 1920s, everybody. Not the 1990s, the 1920s. Okay, old-fashioned people. Okay? People just didn't accept it. The people that like the old culture were not going to let this new liberalism type of thinking come in. But we haven't got that far yet, okay? We haven't got that far yet. This is some of the stuff German people had to put up with, okay? And they also had lesbian magazines. I guess being lesbian was a big thing back then. And then, like I say, it started with that. The gays and the lesbian want to write the same way it was in the States. It's beyond crazy. All right? And I realize YouTube, you don't want this to get out. I really don't give a shit. Okay? This is facts. I ain't making none of this up. This is facts. When I decide to voice my opinion on this show, I'll voice my opinion. But this is facts. Berlin was turned into Sodom and Gomorrah by the Weimar Republic, by liberalism and its sexuality sickness. Okay? By the way, so they had the first, like I say, a published guide of lesbian city guidebook. Okay? Anyway. And then there was some famous lesbian actor. it was hard watching some of the documentaries to get some of this information, but hey, why wasn't I taught this in history class? Then I wouldn't have been asking myself this question ever since I knew, really studied World War II. How did the German people accept a crazy man? Because that crazy man was saner than the people that were trying to take over or that were in charge. They were looking. Anyway, I'm not getting into that yet. Anyway, so then we had, oh, and also during this time, kind of like this time, the gay men distanced themselves from these transgender cross-dressers. They were just gay men who put on men's clothes and went out and did men things, right? And they want to distance themselves and didn't attach themselves to that group because they want to appear respectable. Okay? I guess in their own way. Strictly cycling. Since the beginning of the time, there have always been lesbians and gay. I could care less about sexual orientation. It's called confidence. Yes. But like I say, I'm discussing something about how it led to the rise, how it helped Hitler rise to power. And the same thing that's happening in this country. Exact same thing. It's crazy. The correlations are insane. Okay. Anyway, now we'll go into some of the men that they had to deal with, okay? They had this, and then they had, in Germany, they had separate trans passports. They sat there and, like we're doing in this country, feeding the mental illness, all right? Encouraging the mental illness. But anyway, and then they had, where in the Weimar Constitution, they had something about indecency or, it was a, kind of a catch-all law. And if cops they could harass them because they said the people were dangerous. Imagine that. We think we're dealing with that in our country with transgenders being dangerous. By the way, they could get this if they got stopped and they were safe and stuff, and they get this thing from the police department saying that they were safe and, they've been checked out. Anyway. But one of the goofballs they had to deal with in Germany was a guy named Adolf Brand. He was a World War I vet, okay? Founder, get this. I'm not making this up either, okay? Founder of the community of unique ones. Anyway, that's a good one. Unique ones, right? And he said, homosexual men are superior to heterosexual men because homosexual men, something like knows what it's like to experience truly being a male. Okay, basically idolizing yourself is what it was. Kind of sick shit, okay? But he wasn't even the worst, okay? This is the worst. This guy, Magnus Hirschfeld, okay? He was born in 1868 to a Jewish family in Poland, which would have been Poland's ground back then. Or, I don't think it was Poland. It wasn't Poland then. It would have been part of Prussia, I guess, with a bit. But anyway, he was called the Einstein of sex, all right? And if you ever saw a picture of him, I don't think any normal lady would say that. Okay. But he created the Institute of Sexual Research. Think about that. Institute of Sexual Research. Where in this building, ungodly things. I mean, people were just allowed to be fucking animals if they wanted to. Experiment with sex. I mean, how can sex be that fulfilling where you're willing to completely disrespect yourself? Anyway, and that's the building under Magnus Hirschfeld that the first transgender surgery happened. Yep. But anyway, just a crackpot. And like I say, they also had drugs running rampant in Germany at the time. Not that Germans didn't push methamphetamines and stuff. What was that? Percotin or whatever it was. Yeah, I I watched a thing on the Nazi war machine on methamphetamine. It was terrible what they did to them people to keep them fighting and stuff. And then the public was on it too. They could sit there and buy it at the drugstore and stuff. Anyway, but this Magnus Hirschfeld, he was. I don't know who in the United States we could even sit there and put him under. I don't know enough about the LGBTQA plus or whatever. But whoever their leader is, whoever they look up to, I guess that's who he would be. And then he was a sick man, okay? I mean, just a sick man. I mean, you're actually in the business of, it got an institute, a college basically, on just sexual deviance. Okay, this is mental illness out of control. All right, what else did this guy do? This is what he believed. Sex. I got this. If normal. Okay. Sex, if it is basically abnormal sex is okay because it's, ancient and inherent. Yeah, basically saying, yeah, we've had gays and lesbians your whole life. And nobody says it's bad. Everybody's allowed to live their life they want. But see, the public doesn't want it. And when it's pushed on the public, that's when you have problems. And finally, Germans were having enough of it. Okay? And the Weimar Republic was like, okay, we're going to kind of make it illegal as long as we don't see it. So you had your certain districts in your big city that had it that, the cops didn't go into because they knew what was going on. If we don't see it, it's not happening type of shit. Okay? But the Germans knew it was going on. Okay? And then you got a man out there who wants to make the German culture stronger, willing to sit there and scream his lungs out and tell the bigwigs to screw off. And he had people follow him because they were pissed that they were losing their German culture. I mean, isn't that how we feel in America? Besides the illegals and stuff, this sexual shit is beyond real. They are 0.6% of the population. And they want a democracy, right? Where do you think in a democracy 0.6% of the population would stand? Hey, Bambi, how's it going? Appreciate you subbing. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, we're having a good one tonight. We're comparing, like I say, this is just stuff that's facts. It's just in my mind, I can see the comparison, all right, between how Hitler was helped into power and because everybody was pissed off at the way basically the liberals were running the country and their culture into the ground, and the call for a strong man came up. Any of this correlating with anybody? Am I the only one that can see the correlation? And the people were so pissed off, like you say, they didn't know. Was Hitler something that was good with a few bad side effects, or something bad with a few good side effects? I guess it would have been how much you were pissed off at the Weimar Republic at the time. Now, I'm not stating something. I wouldn't have followed Hitler, okay, because I don't follow MAGA or the liberal Democrats. I would have followed the German culture. And I am German, okay? But the Germans had had enough. I mean, what helped Trump become so powerful? Because of what he did? Or because of what the retards on the left were doing? Be honest with yourself. Those morons helped Trump get into power. The man they hate the most. Because they just couldn't see past their mental illness. This is why mental illness needs to be treated. Okay? Much love tonight, guys. Hey, thanks for being here, Bambi. But yeah, people had enough. Okay? And then in politics, you get Hitler was a populist candidate. And I'm not saying not everybody doesn't know, but why was he a populist candidate? Because the German culture had enough of what was being pushed on him. And the thing is, what gave Hitler more power out in the country is when this stuff in Berlin started spreading out into the country. Everywhere liberalism and the stupid sexualism spread, Hitler got more power. Okay? Hitler had, what was it, in 1928, the Nazis had 2.3% of the vote in Germany. And in 1932, I think it was almost 30%. 27% in 4 years. And I'd say that people were a little pissed off. Okay? And then what made Hitler even more popular, okay? Because he had distractions, okay? He did it just like every politician. He gets in the power, and what's his distractions, okay? He starts enforcing the laws of the Weimar Republic that had on this type of lifestyle. Just like Trump said he was going to release the list, right? German youth brainwashed. What do you call our youth? Our youth don't even have enough brains to be brainwashed. TV anchor blasts Trump with one word about his recent actions, called it by name. All of this happening in another nation. We will not hesitate to describe it clearly. Clark. Anyway, it's the correlations between the two. And then you get in the office and, I hope our country don't go to that level of insanity, because we've had enough of our culture being destroyed and having to swallow this shit, accept it. But we got Megan now that accepts that there's no list. They're okay with that. It was a hoax. I'm fine with that. There's no victims. I'm fine with that. Epstein just had billions of dollars in his residency in cash, and it was all downloading porn from other why don't the IRS try to find out where that money is? I mean, if IRS came in here and I said, and I had no way of being able to make $1 million, and they found $1 million in my house, they'd probably go up my asshole with a microscope to find out where that money came from. But the sexual deviance, when you push something on a culture that they don't want, they will rebel. Okay? And if we're going to have MAGA, they can say whatever. Trump said he didn't need me no more. He didn't need me. Okay? Because I believe the list exists, so it's a hoax and whatever, and they never, he just never, he never talked about it on the campaign trail. He never promised he was going to release it. He never did none of this stuff. It was all a hoax. He never said nothing in the campaign about releasing the Epstein files. I mean, I hear Mega saying that. Then what the hell did I hear? Anyway, Jake in a row in full range of motion. Tell you what, hey, Strictly Cycling, are you ever going to start a fitness channel? Or are you going to make me start a fitness channel first? Anyway, or do some videos while you're riding your bike, driving through New York. It's like, whoa, did you see that? Anyway, hey, it'd be something to sit there and entertain you while you're out there. Epstein list finally coming out. I don't think so, Clint. That's going to bring the whole world down. I mean, the nice thing about it, if it come out and they arrest the people on it, that would solve a lot of this country's problems because our politicians would be gone. We'd have to hold new elections, and we could bring in real people. That would be one way we could do it nonviolently. People that are going to downsize the government, give the power back to the people, make sure justice comes to the criminals and stuff, and no lobbyists, no big money in D.C., and just, basically castrate our politicians so they can't do shit. Initially, my channel was fitness. Now it's cycling in New York. You got a channel? What's the name of your channel? Is it Strictly Cycling? You mean tell me you got a channel? Anyway, I tell you what. But let's get back to the subject, okay? The correlations to what helped Hitler come to power because people were pissed off at what being pushed in onto the German culture and made him a very populist candidate in Germany. Remember, he came to power legally, okay? He didn't win the presidency, but he was appointed chancellor. And then when Hindenburg died, he combined the office of president, became Führer, and the rest is history, right? But guess what? Maybe if Germany went to sit there and push that sick shit on the German people, we wouldn't have had Hitler. They always want to say it's the Treaty of Versailles. Really? I knew that was bullshit. Because the average German just wanted the war over. It was the soldiers that were pissed off, but the average citizen just wanted the war over and be able to go on with their lives. And what ended World War I anyway? What ended it? Can somebody say the real pandemic of 1917 and 1918? That's what really ended the war. And if you study that, like I did 30 years ago, you would have known that this pandemic that they had was nothing but a game of Simon Says. But anyway, I knew it had to be something deeper. The German people were pissed about something. I mean, beyond pissed. When you say, this guy's nuts. He's out there screaming like me, right? Screaming his head off. Telling the government to go screw themselves. One of the only ones that was doing it. He stood tall. He stood proud. He stood strong. And people are going to gravitate to that if they have nothing else. If a person's pissed off and needs to sit there and cling to a group that thinks like them, the loudest group's going to be the easiest, okay? If they need to sit there and be with people that feel like them. And then he was a good orator anyway. But the German people wanted to hear it because their politicians weren't listening to him. The only thing in this country now, it don't matter what side they're on, they're talking the same damn shit. Hitler and Germany didn't want war. I highly suggest in the day of age of AI, I have his speeches translated. The thing is, yeah, well, he went to war. He took over Poland. They had the thing that was rotten and stuff, right? But Germany didn't declare war on France and England. France and England did that on Germany. It's a whole messed up thing. I mean, this is the thing. Okay. Once the bullets started flying in Poland, Hitler's plans for the next 6 years went out the door because he had to react, and he not a good person. Okay, but see what led to the Jews. Oh, we got to get to that part, right? The book burning. Okay, people hated the Jews because a lot of this stuff being brought on was from Jews. And then you hear about the Talmud Jews or whatever now, where transgenderism and sex with children and all this crazy shit is accepted. Were you ever taught that in school? Or I'm a Lutheran, I was never taught that about Judaism. How animalistic it can be. Definitely against American culture, calls us their best allies. Okay? And then they got into this Jewish world conspiracy to take over the world. Well, everybody would say that's hokey pokey, right? And then some of us might say, it looks to me like Israel's definitely pulling the strings on a lot of powerful people in the West. Crazy time. Like I say, correlations just keep on coming. But at least I don't think Germany had to deal with pride parades. That might have ended up, Germany was a scrapping country. That might have ended up in something really bad, okay? But anyway, book burning. Hitler came to power, right? So let's get into the book burning. The Nazis didn't start organizing the book burning. Contrary to, they enjoyed it was happening, kind of like our politicians now. Let's say a group of, I don't know, Antifa or BLM thugs are out doing things, and you got, no. Better yet, you got ICE. And you got politicians, Congress people there with the protesters trying to break into ICE. Something like that, right? Where they were hitching themselves onto the action. Not planning it, but hitching their wagon to it and stuff and making the most of it. Like never let a good crisis go to waste. Right? Who said that? Barack Obama. He was mayor of New York after Barack Obama. He was his chief of staff, I think. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So this is what happened. All right? They called it spontaneous book burning. What was it started by? The German Student Union. Okay, that would have been the young Germans that had enough of this shit. And I hear we're starting to have a growing thing like that in our country where millennials and stuff had enough of it. I hear millennials are more conservative than us Gen Xers. I find it hard to believe, but that would be great because that's the generation we need, to help fight the war. But anyway, they said they were cleansing by fire of books that were leading Germany astray, its culture astray, all right? Anyway, and what books were they burnt? Okay, and then they also wrote the German Student Union to protest all this shit going on. They wrote the 12 Theses, which they tried to resemble Martin Luther's 15 Theses, I think. But basically, you can look it up. German Student Union 12 Theses. And it'll come up. And it's basically putting the responsibility of Germany losing its culture on the Germans. And it's time for Germans to protect it. Okay? It's every German's duty to protect its culture. All right? Anyway, hey, if you're enjoying the content, please hit the thumbs up, the subscribe, and the bell notification because I don't sell anything on this channel. I don't take money, and I don't think you have to pay to hear the truth. And, share my content, but help support the channel in that way. I'd appreciate it. So anyway, I'm And what books were burnt? Okay. Well, obviously the Nazis didn't like communists, and they associated a lot of the communists were Jews, not all of them, but were a lot of them were Jews. And this is why, we group people together and say that was a terrible thing to do. We group people together here, right? How many liberals would want to sit there and make a conservative and throw them in a camp in a shower without no water? Whether they were a good mega Republican or a bad, you group them all together. This human behavior, that's one thing, through the millennial, human behavior, the way human thinks or acts hasn't changed, okay? Just technology has changed, which makes it more abusive to everybody. But, yeah, communist books, a lot of Jews. And they always, when we learned that, I would love to go back to 10th grade when I was studying the World War II with our history teacher and love to ask him, what was in the books that was burnt? He probably wouldn't have knew the answer either. But it was all this devious sexual shit. Okay? And only 4,000 books were banned in Germany under the Nazis. About 4,000. 4,000. And people may say, well, that's a hell of a lot of books. Really? 30,000 books were banned in Germany by the Allies during denazification. Just a little fact. Okay? But anyway, yeah. The sexual deviation, liberalism books were burnt. Okay? Now people might say, that's not right. And I do agree, they should have a right to have their opinions published, okay? But how many of you parents would love to do that with the books that you don't approve of on the same subjects in your school libraries? How many of you that would gladly pile them up in the parking lot and set them ablaze? Doing just what the Germans did. Why? Because the government pushed shit on you that pissed you off so bad that you're willing to do that step because it made you feel good. Okay? It's just, I'm pissed. I'm kind of pissed that I'm finding out this at my age about questions I had that I could never answer. Like I say, how did Hitler come to power? How could a crazy man come to power? And the Germans just accept it and put up with his goofy shit. And then he's got, back then he had his distractions going on when he was, how can we say the Germans weren't for concentration camps? It all depends on how pissed off a public gets. But a lot of these correlations are happening in this country now. And like I say, if you do about an hour's worth of research, it's just uncanny how the true American culture has had enough. And the mega Republicans, the extreme Republicans, are willing to follow their leader through hell or high water. Okay, they're that pissed off that that's their savior they've been looking for. And flat out, savior is a good word for a lot of the people. Turning them into a god. I mean, the correlations are insane. And then another thing Hitler started doing was starting to spend a ton on the military. The military budget in Germany just skyrocketed. Anyway, it's crazy time. It's crazy time. And we're going to follow in the same footsteps? Or DC's going to be like one day is going to be like Berlin in April of 1945. The rest of the world, I don't know. I'd hope it wouldn't get that stupid. But you can't deny the correlations. You can't deny the anger level of Germans losing their culture to this sick mental illness and not compare it to our culture. I mean, how many videos you got to see on social media see that American culture's pissed at this shit? Now we got some that believe there's no list because they're so sick of this shit. They're willing to hide from the truth. A lot of Germans hid from the truth because it's easier to do that and be happy with what the regime was doing than to face the truth. I mean, you know what it was like for a German who really knew what happened to the Jews? A lot of them suspected it, just like we all suspect a lot of stuff these days. Imagine if you knew all the secrets for real, like what really happened in the JFK assassination and who was behind it, and the Martin Luther King assassination, and the Robert Kennedy assassination, and 9/11, and Pearl Harbor. Okay? If you knew all the truth behind UFOs and Bigfoot. You'd probably hide from the truth too, because it'd be something that'd be awful hard to live with. Anyway, hey, and one thing. Hey, strictly cycling, I want to ask you something. When all those drones were going crazy on the East Coast last year and early this spring, did you see any of them? Putin keeps violating Trump's peace deadline, but has faced no consequences. There is no 50-day deadline, 10, I know. 2-week time frames. Putin is laughing. I know. You know, how weak can you be? Oh, let me tell you something. When I get pushed, I'm a real passive guy. But when I find somebody's pushing me, and you guys can tell when the other guy wants to fight. And when I say, if you say one more thing to me, I'm going to fucking punch you, I'm never joking. I actually did that once in 10th grade, where I came back from the dentist and one of my friends was just hounding me. It was in class. Just fucking being an asshole. My mouth hurt. This is the middle of class. I stood up. He stood up. I cold-cocked him and sat back down. Just chicken shit warning stuff. This is what I'm saying, people. What do we got to be afraid of? They're a bunch of frickin' beta males. Putin is an alpha, all right? An alpha. And he knows he's dealing with a bunch of betas, both in the West and in the East with the people he's dealing with. Putin is the most manly leader we got in the world today. That's just a fact. But then again, you know, he has a little bit different of a history than the rest of the people that are in power these days. He wasn't brought up to live a soft life. And being a colonel in the KGB, he knows he's forgotten more tactics than these stupid ass politicians, especially ours and Trump, will ever know. He's forgotten more of it than they'll ever know. It's not even a fair fight. But Americans, yep, Russia's getting his ass kicked. Russia's got a strategy in this war. You know, demoralize the West, get everybody sick of war, drain the treasuries of that country. Well, he's just making money hand over fist. I mean, look at the Russian lifestyle now. A lot better than ours. Anyway, in the bigger cities. Now, of course, you get out. I ain't going to say that. I don't know what it's like out in the sticks, okay? But I know I've lived out in the sticks of the United States. And can you hear me now? They don't play those commercials out there. Have a good night. Heading to bed. Hey, thanks for being here, J99. I appreciate it. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to get off here too. YouTube's cutting down on this. I'm actually surprised they didn't kill the stream. Okay, but the correlations between the Weimar Republic and trying to destroy the German culture with their sick shit and what's going on in this country, it's beyond real. They're following the same course. Like I say, the liberal Democrats is what made Trump such a populist. Okay? Because of their retarded actions they were doing, and the American public was having such a problem with it. That's what made Trump such a populist. I only took 7 months for Eric Trump to become a billionaire since his father took office. Yeah, but see, this is the thing, strict recycling. Eventually, the dollar is going to be worthless. That's why everybody needs to prepare for the dollar to be worthless. All right? The only reason the dollar has any value now is because people are stupid enough to take it for an exchange of goods. Okay? When all that stops, we'll find out what a third world country is overnight. Anyway, tell you what, I appreciate everybody being here. If you like to support the channel, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and the bell notification. Anything to help the channel out. We got to get the truth out there because we're following a course that history has already followed once. And people need to wake up. Okay, this ain't good. I don't like coming to a live stream and telling a story like this. Not a story, laying out facts like this. But it happened. And the Germans acted the same way to save their culture, the same way Americans will act and are acting to save our culture. Like I say, all you parents that have kids in school, all these books you don't want in the library because they're sexually deviant, tell me you wouldn't pile them up in the parking lot and set them ablaze. Anyway, crazy times, people. So, I guess when crazy people leave the world, it leads to crazy people lead to crazy times. That'll be my thought of the day tomorrow. When crazy people are in charge, it leads to crazy times. Anyway, everybody have a great night. I appreciate you all being here. And we'll see what the subject is tomorrow night. And then Saturday night, I take off. Saturday, I go play cards or poker or golf and hang out and watch movies and stuff. Still need a day off. But everybody have a great night. This is Tom with Hidden Truths. I'm out of here.